We do beautiful PowerPoint presentations and we use a whole lot of data and we do reach curves. But very simply put, it's taking the brand message and finding the most effective and best way to ensure that they can connect with consumers to obviously get an outcome. And the outcome can be sales, it can be brand building, it can be driving more awareness, whatever it may be. But the connection is actually the point of the strategy.
Welcome back to the Beyond the Billboard podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do subscribe. Today, our topic is shaping the skyline, how large brands play in the out-of-home landscape. Today, we are joined by a very esteemed guest, Litha Vimbi, the General Manager of OMB South Africa. Litha is a strategist by nature, having led and managed and executed media strategies across large advertising clients in South Africa. Clients such as McDonald's, Nissan, Kimberly-Clark, Diageo, and even previously Standard Bank and MTN. Litha, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you with us on this podcast.
Thank you.
Litha, I think, we often in these episodes or in some of our previous episodes, we speak around media strategy, right? We speak about out of home in media strategy. We speak about media strategy for a lot of different clients, but we don't often talk about what is a media strategy. And I think it's important, as one of the values of our podcast, is to be educational and informative. It's important to take that step back and have, an answer. What is a media strategy? What is the purpose of a media strategy? Why do clients look to media agencies to develop media strategies? And I think that is a really great place to start the podcast on today. Before we move into anything else on our topic, I think if you can just share a little bit based on your extensive career in media strategy and having led large teams that manage media strategies for large clients, I think it's a great place to start.
Okay, so very simply put, I would say that a media strategy is the purpose of it is to find ways for brands to connect with people, finding spaces in which brands can connect with people. And that's why even at OMD, for example, part of our ethos is that we're absolutely consumer obsessed. It's all about the consumer. And so what you want is you want to find spaces in which the brands can then connect with those people authentically and in a way that really, really matters. And yes, we do beautiful PowerPoint presentations and we use a whole lot of data and we do reach curves. But very simply put, it's taking the brand message and finding the most effective and best way to ensure that they can connect with consumers to obviously get an outcome. The outcome can be sales, it can be brand building, it can be driving more awareness, whatever it may be. But the connection is actually the point of the strategy.
Litha, I love how you have beautifully painted that picture. And I love that you've also thrown in some reach curves, because I know that it is a very complex process. And thank you for simplifying it. And I love starting with the consumer, being consumer obsessed. All of those things are at the heart of shaping the media strategy around the specific brand. So I love your starting point. And you touched on kind of using different data research to understand which media channels will be the most effective. And I think if you asked any out-of-home person, we would always say out-of-home should always be in every strategy, because out-of-home can deliver on reach, out-of-home can deliver on mass awareness, all these wonderful things. But the reality is that not every brief does contain out-of-home. And sometimes for very specific reasons, it could be a budget thing, it could be a channel selection process. I wanted to find out from you, what can you share with us around the process? We understand that the media strategy is created, but how do you determine if out-of-home specifically should be involved, or what is out-of-home's role within the media strategy when the strategy is being created? We find often that the strategy feels like such an elusive piece to everybody on the outside of the strategy. I think the client and the agency are very aligned, but when it comes to the media owners or the step outside that immediate circle, sometimes even the creative agency, or sit outside of the media strategy, and you see bits or glimpses of it, or you only get given a certain amount of information around it, that you wonder, well, why didn't that brief have out of home on it? Or that campaign would have been perfect. I heard it on radio. Why was there no out of home?
Yeah.
And like I said, sometimes they're very specific processes that go on in the background. So if you could share anything around that with us.
100%. So, I mean, big brand feel, right? So, I think I saw something the other day and it said, when you're on big static billboards, you own the streets. And I thought, oh, I love that. I love that quote because it's about just having this big brand feel and being in the consumer's faces. The nice thing about it is that it isn't like a digital ad. You can't just skip it. And unless you're driving with your eyes closed, you are going to see it, right?
Which
Um,
sometimes you think half the people are actually.
I think people are. And also, what you also have is that I know that when we do look at out of home, we do feel sometimes that it is quite a pricey medium to be in. But when you start calculating the amount of frequency that you get specifically within, specific routes, for example, you actually
Mm,
find that the cost is very effective when you start looking at the high frequency that you get. And so it is twofold. And I say that because how I like to work is that do we want big brand feel? Do we want to showcase the brand, out there within the market? And we should definitely have out of home as part of the plan. And it doesn't have to be, 20 large format billboards. You may have one really big, beautiful, iconic board in the middle of Joburg, for example, and you'll get the message out there. But then the other part of it is that, especially on big brands, for example, where they have outdoor as part of the holding, this is the holding that we have. These are the best sites. Make it fit into your strategy. So even if we
mm,
needed to do street furniture or something else, guys, this is outdoor and there's almost a separate outdoor strategy from the overall strategy. And that's kind of what I've struggled with. And I think a lot of strategists struggle with is that we get media owners saying, but this board or, what we have is perfect for your strategy. But sometimes the outdoor, from a holding perspective, lives
mm.
completely outside of the overall strategy and almost has its own strategy because nobody wants to give up on the biggest and the best boards.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
sure. You've
think
unpacked so many things there that I actually want to double click on.
me
One,
too.
when you were like, outdoor can be expensive, I'm like, no, 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 wait, what about the cost per thousand? And you touched on that. So thank you. I think my out of home like sirens were going like, hold on, we can definitely get into this. And I think it's such a good point that I almost want to go further on, because I think it's a comment that I've also had from clients before, and that at times out of home can seem very expensive. So a large format wrap site, a digital screen can seem very expensive compared to a static site. At times it may be a bit smaller, but it is about actually looking at the cost per thousand. As you mentioned, the frequency, all of those factors come into account to actually bring the cost down. That if you look at it at face value without going into actually how many people you're reaching with the one board and look at the cost per thousand, you really can start to tell a different story about the board that seemed, in inverted commas, expensive.
100%.
And obviously it's within reason, but I loved how you kind of gave that rationale from your side too.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think there's more conversations around the cost effectiveness and the modeling of costing for out of home that's happening now in the market, right? Before it was, this is the cost of out of home, this is the cost of a city light, or this is the cost of a large format. Whereas now it's more around understanding the reach, the modeling, the impressions, the frequency, and actually bringing that back down to say it's actually one of the most cost-effective mediums. I also think I saw Chris Buerta also posted something around it being one of the most cost-effective CPMs, right, in the
Yeah.
market. So I think it's important to recognize that. But what I also wanted to speak on, because I also agree, there were so many things that you mentioned, and I was like, oh, let's double click on so many of those. But there was one that you were saying, there's out of home holdings for a lot of these large brands, right? When we're talking about large brands playing in out of home and in shaping the skyline. a lot of the time they have these out-of-home holdings, which due to their sheer size, they also have their own strategy, right? We can't look at the consumer's experience and the journey of this one medium outside of that. It still needs to ladder up into the overarching media strategy and how that connection, as you were saying, was happening with that consumer throughout their day. And sometimes I think because of the sheer size of the out-of-home holding and the out-of-home strategy, it's often segmented or separated out, which, yes, it needs to have its own strategic approach. It needs to have its own location strategy about where you're playing, how you're playing, what formats you're on. And I completely agree with that. But sometimes it can be to the detriment of the overall the overall media strategy for that brand. And I don't know if you've also seen that come through. It's often like, okay, now out of home, we know what we're doing there. We're going to do a separate strategy. Versus like, actually, we need to make sure we're factoring this in with how the consumer's connecting with your brands and how you're communicating with them within this wider strategy.
100%. I mean, to a point where even the creative doesn't match sometimes, or it feels like we're not creating for the medium, like taking a 15-second cut down of the TVC and putting it up on a digital board, right? Or
Oh, the horror.
or where we go on
I
outdoor,
agree.
we're just going to feature the product and we just put on a big picture of the product, and it has absolutely no link to the rest of the campaign. But it seems like TV, radio, print, whatever it is all linked. And then outdoor is, no, here we're just doing overarching brand feel. And yet we're in the middle of your biggest complete outlier. And so...
And that's such a loss because out-of-home works so well from a support or synergy point of view with some of these other
100%.
mediums, right? Like when you really spend time to strategically see how you can work them together, out-of-home and search, out-of-home and radio, and you bring them together, it can make such powerful and effective campaigns. But often when you're looking at it in silo, you're actually doing a negative injustice to the medium, right? Yes, out-of-home can be, and it is brand building, and it does drive brand equity, and it does drive brand trust. But when you have some of these big, large players in the out-of-home space that are running some amazing summer campaigns, festive campaigns, whatever it might be, leaving that out as a separate outlier and not looping it into that overall media strategy can be detrimental to the campaign. And I think it's campaigns that are, I want to say award-worthy, but not just award-worthy, that also move the needle from a business point of view and a business are those campaigns that look at it really holistically and see how we can create that synergies so that we ultimately know how we're connecting with that consumer through that journey.
Big
And
bets.
I think sometimes because of the size of the amount of out of home, it's hundreds of sites or a vast amount of digital out of home scheduling or whatever it might be, it often is, oh, we'll just actually have this creative. We're just going to put it on as you said, like just put it on these sites versus actually looping it into the overall media strategy. And I think that's a big learning for a lot of large brands is to not consider it as an outlier. Yes, as I said, it still needs its own strategy because of where do you play, what formats do you play, and in all that location piece. But making sure that it's still linked into your overall media strategy is critical.
That's exactly it.
It's such a great topic that we're unpacking within a topic really around these large brands that have got these holdings that have been built over time. So it's legacy holdings in some cases, and we're not talking about fighting to get out of home on the schedule. I think it's interesting that we're speaking that out of home is such a critical piece for certain brands that do have these large holdings that go over a period of 12 months or more. But it's how do you integrate the out of home piece with the rest of the media schedule in a way that is succinct, that means that they actually do work well together and that there isn't a silo and a disconnect. And I think it takes a very well-informed strategic team, strategic direction, and understanding of out of home to make those connections, because you don't want such a key media to be sitting on its own almost, as you mentioned, even with different creative at times. You want that synergy to run across, and holdings are built up of sites that everybody wants to have. Like, there are often brands are like, oh, I've seen this amazing site, when will that site be available? And usually, if you know the out-of-home landscape, the answer is sometimes, well, in a couple years, if that brand ever lets it go. So a lot of these holdings are made up of the most impactful key sites that you really want in specific locations, but they're held onto by the brands. It's just to make sure that the brand who has the site actually knows how to use it properly. And when that site or when that brand, is moved from one agency to another, when, pitches are won and lost, how do you carry through that thread of the purpose of the holding and the strategic build behind the holding? How does it hold when it moves over to a different agency?
100%, Liv. And sometimes it isn't even from agency to agency. It's also within the same agency. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you find that the strategist who's working on the overarching and overall plan isn't the same person who is pulling together the outdoor strategy and selecting the boards, because a lot of these large agencies have got an outdoor department. And if you don't have those strategists within this agency working together, you will have an outdoor strategy and then you will have a media strategy. And the two speak to each other, because you now have a strategist that's briefing the outdoor department who does their own thing. And I 100% believe in having an outdoor department. I think that I think there's so much detail and a whole lot of intricacies, that actually need an eye, and somebody who's incredibly knowledgeable. And so I'm having an outdoor department, but I believe working in isolation of each other now results in having this holding or this outdoor plan and a strategy that doesn't speak to it.
Nalissa Media, your brand, their eyes, amplified with our out-of-home solutions. Get your brand to the people with Nalissa Media's dynamic out-of-home media solutions, tailored to fit your unique campaign needs. Whether you want to engage audiences on billboards, transit ads, or digital screens, we have the right platform for you. Elevate your brand visibility and impact with our innovative and cost-effective solutions.
We've spoken about, this power of out of home. We've spoken about these holdings that clients are rightly so very attached to. It's come up in one of our other episodes with Michelle Pile, where we spoke about clients having like a wish list of the sites that they wanted to go onto. And in that episode, we discussed clients aren't sitting around wishing that they can advertise on YouTube. It's really, out of home has got such a special place on the client schedule for very intentional purposes. The scale, we understand the brand impact, and we also understand there's such an emotive connection to the out of home channel for the client side and the agencies and the media owners and the creatives. Everybody along that process and chain has got an invested interest. And I wanted to find out from you, as we head towards our close, from a creative perspective and from a campaign perspective, what campaigns stand out to you from an out of home point of view that you have loved the work that's been done, either something that you and your team have executed over the years, something local or something global? Would love to just get, I love asking guests what stands out to them, because often we learn something, but also it's nice to have those thought starters on what is sticking in people's minds. We know that the creative is such a huge piece around, booking the format. The media team can do everything that they need to do to get the actual site secured, but then what's going to appear on the site has got such an equally important role. So, and sometimes the ideas that stand out are the ones that were exceptionally creative or that had a specific kind of nuance to them that stood out. So I would love to ask if there's any great creative or great campaigns that have stood out to you over the years in out of home.
I would say the Joy of Jazz, the Standard Bank Joy of Jazz live billboard. Brilliant. They actually had a jazz band playing, and you could tune into a specific frequency, which was written on the board. And they had people, like an actual band, like on the billboard playing, like live people with like all strapped in. And
talk about experience and out of home coming together, right?
exactly. And you could tune into a specific frequency, and I loved the link to radio, and you could hear what they played.
Yeah.
And the point of the strategy was to bring in a larger audience to Joy of Jazz, because the view was that, it's jazz, it's stuffy, it's for old people. Yet you have on that main road there, you have so many people driving there of all colors and ages and sizes and races, etc., that you could actually broaden it. And once they heard the type of music that could be played, they might then be interested in the jazz festival. Ticket sales went up, and they ended up winning an award for it. And not
Mm,
because the execution was just so wonderful, which it was, but also because it had real results. And I love that. I love campaigns and outdoor pieces that have real results, but I also like ones that link to other channels. So I love it.
mm.
That's just always my example. I love, love, love.
It's, I knew you were going to say it. Like, I knew it. Do you know that as Liv was asking that question, I saw it in my mind's eye. Like, I remember all the visuals. I was at the awards when they won, and I remember seeing it. And as Liv was asking that question, I was like, I can feel that this is what Litha's going to answer. And it was, as you said it, you saw that big smile come up on my face. I think it was perfect. It's also one of my favorites, and I think it was great because it showcased that synergy of the mediums, but also because it had that business impact in that result, and also because it was just really cool. Like,
Just
really,
really
really cool to have a jazz band on a billboard. I mean, epic.
brilliant. Yeah, Julia Rodriguez and the team did, I think, amazing work there. And yeah, just impressive and clever, not just impactful because it was so real and it spoke to a real problem.
And it ties back to exactly what you were saying in the beginning when the first question was, what is a media strategy? What is it to deliver? And you were saying it's to create that connection with the consumer, and those immersive experiences, as you said now, are creating that connection with that consumer. And that's also just why they move the needle, and they just really, really cool and really impactful. I want to just add one more question, and I like to ask this to senior agency leaders in the industry, is how do media owners put their best foot forward with media agencies and looking to find time to build relationships with media agency staff? It's often a barrier. There's so many media owners. We know this, particularly in the out-of-home space. But what would your recommendation be as closing points for this episode to media owners that will be listening to this episode to say, this is our advice, or this is your advice, this is how they can potentially put their best foot forward?
I think they need to come and speak to the heads of the agency, and we as leaders within the industry need to ask our people to give time. I know that there are many, many media owners, but in them being our partners, we need to give time. Secondly, you need to know the brands that you're pitching to. So, for example, if you're coming and wanting to showcase for an alcohol brand, just as an example, it's very rare that you'll see them on like very small sites or maybe on like street furniture type sites, etc. They want big brand feel out there. What are the competitors doing? Do your homework. Come and show me and showcase to me how you can uplift my brand and make it better. Show me that you've done the competitor analysis. Show me that you understand my brand. Otherwise, it's a waste of your time and it's a waste of my time. And then lastly, show me something new. I think it almost feels like, oh, we already know what you do. You're going to show me another board. Show me something new. And I think too many times, more often than not, we just get a presentation, sometimes printed out this thick, laminated with like 59 sites. And I have no idea what to do with this. But say to me, these are the 2 sites that I've chosen for you. This is why there's a bottle store here. There's this there, or there's a car dealership here. There's this, it's on the way to the gym. You sell health bars, whatever it may be. Show me that you have put thought into understanding the brand, understanding the landscape, as well as the competitors. But lean on the leaders of the agency. They will be the ones to chat to their people, to give you time, to give you an ear. But when you do come through, when we speak, the aim must be value, not just showcasing. If the aim is just to showcase, we're not going to get far.
Yeah. And I think I love all of those. And it's the exact points that Livia and I also speak about when we do some of our fundamentals trainings, is exactly that. Like, I always, recognize what Liv says and repeat is that she says, if, you're going to keep knocking on a door when it opens, you better have something great to show. And Liv's always said that. And I completely agree with that is, bring the value, showcase that, be respectful of the time that, these agency staff and senior leaders or agency staff are giving to you, and bring something new. You don't go in and, regurgitate or show the same information, but you've shown no strategic thought or alignment to the brand or understanding the brand. And I think that's really, really critical and such good points that I would love to close the episode on. Litha, I would just like to say thank you so much for joining us. I think we could have continued chatting for another 30 minutes. Like, it
So
just felt like
too.
there was so much more to talk about. But I think the key points that we spoke about were absolutely amazing. Talking about what is a media strategy, talking about how large brands work within media strategies and holdings. I think we really crossed so many critical points in today's episode, and we loved having you, and I can't wait for one day having you back. But thank you for joining us, and it was really, really fantastic.
Thank you for having me, guys. This was really a great experience.
Thanks for joining us today to go beyond the billboard. Subscribe to our podcast to ensure you don't miss out on our exciting content.
Join us again to go beyond the billboard.
1,